affordable housing, I still understand what that term means. Affordable to who?
How can you raise children, have mom home in the afternoon when your child comes home, and still make a living and stay here has become out of reach for most people.
I know a lot of people that work for Fox and CNN and these outlets. Do you think they hire the most intelligent person? No. They hire a person who's going to be histrionic and fun to listen to, who's going to say bombastic things. The other person says bombastic things. Everyone on both sides is stimulated. Cut to commercial, buy your pharmaceutical pills.
Don't ever turn your eyes from what we're doing. Watch us. See where your money's going. Ask questions.
I despise political debates. You have 60 seconds to say something and then move on so this person can attack you.
Younger generation, they're already kind of suspect of, well, that person's in power. I shouldn't just assume they're a good person, that they're always going to be right.
Instead of looking for people that are making great memes about the other side, I would say look for more people that say things like, don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, mind your business. I'm not interested in diversity at all. I'm interested in unity.
So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming to meet here today. I'm Brendan Straka. I'm the founder of the #WalkAway campaign. And my organization, WalkAway, wants to spend a lot of time this year in the state of New Jersey because I've been trying to tell people that there are two key philosophies I want people to embrace. That's every year is an election year. We can't just get involved every 2 or 4 years. And that every election needs to be viewed as a national election. We all need to care what's happening all across the country because it matters who the governors are. It matters who the Supreme Courts and states are and the state legislators. So I wanted to bring some mayors in New Jersey together today to talk about the concerns and the issues that the people of New Jersey are thinking about going into this election year in New Jersey in 2025. So what I'd love to do is start by going around the table, have you introduce yourself and maybe tell us what town you're the mayor of and what's something interesting about your town.
Sure. So I'm Nick Cara. I'm the mayor of the borough of Raritan in Somerset County. And President Harding ended World War I by signing the Knox-Porter Agreement in Raritan.
I'm Mark Taylor, Borough of Florham Park. Been mayor for a very long time, 13 years. Our town is noted for our Little Red Schoolhouse, an historic building in the center of town.
I'm Daniel Francisco. I'm the mayor in Englishtown, and our little borough is famous for a little building called the Village Inn, where the Continental Army stayed during the Battle of Monmouth. So that's our claim to fame.
Mayor Ryan Martinez, Butler, New Jersey. Our claim to fame is our old rubber mill and also the individual who helped build the Statue of Liberty lived in Butler.
New Jersey is a really beautiful state, and it's got so many incredible attributes, and it's a state that people really care about. I just had a discussion with a group of young people. They absolutely love New Jersey. Many of them grew up, born and raised in New Jersey. They don't want to leave. They want to stay here. But many of them are very, very concerned about their financial futures, and not just in the state of New Jersey, but in a country where the promise of the American dream is feeling more and more unattainable, I think, to a lot of young people. So looking at issues like, the economy and affordability of living in New Jersey, can you guys kind of speak to, what that's like for the citizens of New Jersey who are worried about the affordability of living here in this state?
I don't know how people can live in this state. I don't know how I would ever be able to come back to this state were I to leave and come back. And I have a 30-year-old daughter and son-in-law who have been looking for 2.5 years for a small, moderate home in the $500,000 range, and they can find nothing to buy in this state. It's really a sad state of affairs. Nothing in our town is selling under $1 million, which is really sad.
When I was growing up, I grew up in a very kind of lower middle class, average American family. My parents didn't go to college. My dad was a cattle rancher and a farmer, but we had a nice life, and we did pretty well. And the idea of being a millionaire, becoming a millionaire, I mean, that was like the American dream. Oh my God, maybe one day I could become a millionaire. Now you have to be a millionaire to have a house. What's going on?
Yeah, that's the status quo now. And my parents are immigrants from a former fascist dictatorship in Europe. They're Portuguese. So everyone in my family that came here largely in the 60s through the 80s, they flourished in one generation and have done relatively well. But from the federal and state level, the way you see the federal government printing money like they're drunk, that debases the value of every asset that every single American and New Jerseyan owns. And then on the state level, they're in massive debt anytime they want to pull out a pet project. So it is way harder today than it would have been 40 years ago, just from a monetary perspective, to do anything, let alone buy a house, because your assets just get degraded every year.
Yeah, I mean, my father moved to America in 1970. He did not attend high school when he was in Italy, but he came here. He started out as a mason. He then became his own general contractor, and he did really well for himself. But obviously, in 2008, that market got hit a little bit, so he's struggled since then. But I don't think if someone in his shoes tried to do what he did, they would be even half as successful as he was. And honestly, I have a bunch of friends that I'm 29, so I've had friends in the last 5 years move to Florida, North Carolina. They just can't find work that pays them enough to just meet their basic needs here. So, it's going to take some really rolling up our sleeves, but I don't know if everyone at the state or higher is really willing to do the work yet.
Mayor Martinez?
I grew up in the 80s in the Bronx, in Co-op City, and unfortunately I remember having to go to housing court with my parents when they couldn't pay the rent. And I remember the struggles that we had. And back then the rent was $500-$600. So that affected me. And you grow up, I went to law school. My wife is a partner in her firm. Like, we have a decent living. It's still really expensive to live here. And there are people that are not doing as well as us who are having a hard time when they have to spend $15 on eggs, or when they can't get to work, or when if their car blows, that's a major blow to them. It's very, very difficult. And we just had, coming out of a pandemic where the federal government decided to print how much, $8 trillion, whatever it was. And they gave us $1,200. A bunch of it went to places it wasn't supposed to. And now we're stuck with the ramifications of it.
I've been having conversations with people and they're concerned about the economy, talking about one of the number one things they're talking about in New Jersey is property taxes. They said that their property taxes are through the roof and that they're escalating at these astronomical levels. People have said they've gone to city hall meetings, brought this up and asked, why is this happening? And it's a lot of passing the buck. It's because of this, it's because of that. Why is this happening?
In New Jersey, approximately 2/3 of your property taxes are public schools. So that is, without a shadow of a doubt, the number one culprit. And then you have to question the value and whether that institution is doing its job, right? You have certain districts where per pupil they're spending $45,000, $40,000 per kid. In Englishtown, we have a district called Manalapan Englishtown Regional Schools. They're spending about 19, just shy of 20,000. A Catholic school, a private school, is 8,000. So the value is 1/3 of the cost, but are you getting 3 times the value? I would argue you're not. But that is the biggest culprit of your property taxes, and the 4 mayors here have nothing to do with that whatsoever. So the passing the buck is true. It's a different body that is responsible for the majority of that cost. If you talk to conservative group leaders, they'll tell you they're wholly dissatisfied with not only the quality, but the content of what their children are being exposed to in public schools. And then they'll be frustrated that they seemingly have no control over their local issues and boards because Trenton prescribes things that override their issues. My district was one of 3, Middletown, Marlborough, Manalapan English, that were part of the lawsuit for parental notification, which has been a national issue, a state issue rather. So you're not getting the value of what you want, and at the same time, you're powerless in a way to stop Trenton from running your district. So it's a double-edged sword. It's very bad.
It's based on what the state's formula has become. So when they were at 52% of the number, they under Murphy's administration, the current governor, he had said that he was going to increase that rate to all the schools in all the districts over his 4 and an 8-year term. That's only gone to 58%. So all of these school districts that keep getting money pulled away from them, it's not going to other school districts where it can be of help. Our town, particularly, is 60 cents of every dollar goes to the school systems. 6.7% of that dollar goes to the county, and the rest comes to the borough of Florham Park. And we run a $25 million budget out of that small percentage of monies. We do maintain the second lowest tax rate in Morris County, and we have for, I think, 3 generations. So, which is awesome. It's great to do, but the taxes are still too high.
We're in a shared school district with Bridgewater, which is a much larger town. So out of the 9 members on that school board, Raritan only has 1 voting member. So we're kind of at the mercy of our neighbor. And just, I've noticed no matter who's on that school board, it just seems they always kind of favor whatever the superintendent or the administration's kind of pushing. And there's never really ever an actual dialogue with an idea of how can we cut the budget. It just always seems to go up. So I think that's just also, it just falls on them to figure out a way to make the system more affordable. Maybe figure out how they can make the pupils price per pupil lower while still either maintaining or improving the testing scores or however they want to evaluate.
Let me ask you, on some of these school boards, is there a political slant or bias that you feel? Does that?
So, I mean, they're nonpartisan, all the school board elections in New Jersey, but, I'm also the vice chair of my municipal Republican committee. We try to put candidates up, but it just seems, again, we're the one seat, so not a lot of interest from residents to really be on the school board. But it just seems that we've struggled to find someone who can kind of break that mold at the administrative level.
With the school system, school boards especially, listen, they say it's not partisan, that's a lie. Stop it. Okay? People don't check their politics at the door. They say it's not partisan, those people have their political leaning and slants, 100%. So I just kind of dismiss that when people say it's not supposed to be partisan, it is. As far as the actual school, look, that's where a lot of finger pointing happens, and I don't really subscribe to it. Oh, if these scores aren't high, it's the teachers. No, it's the parents. No, it's trans, the curriculum. I just don't think a one curriculum fits all. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for my kids, it doesn't work for your kids. Parents should have more say in what their kids are learning. If your kid is not good in science, I don't know why we're forcing him to do it. If he has a knack for building and he can put a 4,000 Lego piece set in 4 seconds, he should be slanted towards more in construction, things that uses his hands, not learning,
So what's the solution? Charter schools, or what is the solution?
I would not pick one specific thing. I would leave that into the hands of the individual. That's a big thing that I think probably me and Dan will probably talk about the most. I don't know you well enough to go, this is what you should do. You know. So I want you to be able to have the ability to go, I'm taking this money and I'm going to put it here for my child. That's where I don't care if you call it school choice, vouchers, anything. Just you make the decision. That's the way it should be. It should be based on the individual.
There's no other institution or facet in your life where you allow the sovereignty of your family to be in the hands of a board of people to make a decision about what's best for you, right? Like, families will go out to eat and choose to eat one type of dinner, another type of dinner. Maybe they're vegan, maybe they want to eat healthy, maybe they want to eat unhealthy food. They'll go to a particular doctor that they think is appropriate for them. They'll make financial decisions. But with schools, there's this one size fits all, where a board of people that don't necessarily have your interests in mind and a group of politicians in Trenton who have authority over them can put in policy to dictate your life, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. At face value, it's insane, right, to me. So I have kind of a more radical opinion. I think the entire enterprise should be eradicated. I don't believe in public schools personally, but that's my opinion, and it's a little bit outside of the mainstream. But that idea of, like, let's put you in a cage, and let's have people who aren't the parents of your kids fight over what your kid has to do. It's kind of nuts, right? If I gave you my son and said, go take him to dinner, and I had no choice over, you give him ice cream every day, he'd be sick, right? But why is it that it's okay to relinquish your kids to an institution that doesn't care about you in education? Like, to me, that's a little crazy.
What we're hearing is a lot of concern from parents about woke ideology in the school, and that, they want their kids being taught the basics. They're not being taught the basics. So if all of this money is going into the public education system and the parents aren't happy with what their kids are being taught in the schools, how is this working?
So we have a Catholic school in our town, which was towards the end of the last decade was failing, just from low enrollment. But since COVID, I've seen they've had an uptick, and I think that's kind of where we're headed now. Is people who are really fed up with what's being pushed by the state are just opting out, and then, unfortunately, they still have to pay the property taxes as if their child was at the public school. But then on top of that, with the cost of sending them to the Catholic school, I've only graduated high school 11 years ago, and the stories I hear from students from that high school, I couldn't have imagined 11 years ago what's going on. I mean, they have there's litter boxes in the bathroom for those that identify as furries, which, I mean, I don't know if it's the teachers or the administration, but 11 years ago, I could only see the teachers being like, all right, stop with that nonsense. Like, we got to get back to class. What are we prioritizing? Making sure everyone feels comfortable, or that at least you're getting out of here with an education to be a successful member of society?
Again, I'll use the restaurant example. His restaurant is terrible. His restaurant is great, so I spend my money there. I don't know why that's not used, why parents can't use that same thought process for their students' education. If this teacher is going to push this ideology that I don't agree with, or I don't want my kid learning, I should be able to take my money and go, I want this teacher, or I want to take him here for this thing. And by the way, I wouldn't advocate for it. We're going to have patriotic Stars and Stripes class either. Some people are like, I don't want my kid doing that. I want him to be learning math and history. Okay, great. So you should be able to take your money where you want to go. The biggest problem I see is that they take this whole bunch of money from everyone, and then there's a fight over who's going to control it and what the ideology is. If you have a more liberty-based solution, you have to fight for people's money. And I feel like competition drives everything. If someone wants to watch your podcast, it's because they are actually interested in what you are putting out there. Mine is boring. No one's watching. I get no subs. Why not use that same logic with school? Okay, these people seem to do a really good job with sports and learning, what have you. I want my money to go there. That's the way it has to be. It has to be treated like a competition like anything else. That's where the best ideas will end up going to, and that's where the money will end up going to.
And by the way, Mayor Francisco, I think your restaurant is great. He shouldn't have said that to you. That
No,
was rude.
he's correct, because it creates an irrational captive market with a centralized authority. And if you continue with the restaurant analogy, right, you would call me crazy if I suggested as the mayor that we are going to open a government restaurant and all children from ages of 5 to 18 must eat in that restaurant every day. They don't get to choose what to eat. If they leave, the police will arrest them, right? Because you're captive in that building during those hours. And they're going to eat schlop every day. They're going to eat Soylent Green, whatever crazy thing that this centralized authority says they must eat. If we explain that, you're all looking at me with smirks, that's insane. But we do that every day with education. Why? This behavior that these authorities end up engaging in and manipulating your children with the kind of content that you're alluding to, they can because of that centralized power. We wouldn't engage in this behavior in any other facet of our life, choosing where to eat, choosing what lawyer to hire, what vacation to go on. There's no board that has power over us telling us what to do. The free market is the solution to that. Liberty is the solution to statism at all times, especially. That's going to be what saves not just the financial angle, right, being 3 times more expensive to go to a public school than a Catholic school per student, but the philosophical angle, right, the cultural angle that has implications for generations to come. That's how the free market solves that, because then parents will naturally gravitate to the solution they think is best, to his point. So
We're missing in our public school systems the trades. They've gone away from small engine and mechanics and shop and building something. Who's going to be the next generation that's going to fix your car, your car?
and they make more money than a bachelor's degree now.
Who's
Why
going to be the
not?
electrician that's going to wire this next building that gets built? I mean, everyone is not suited to go to college in the next step of their life or be a professional, as most of us have become. They're going to do things that are going to be in the trades, and they've gotten away from that, which is really distressing to me, personally.
For the 7th consecutive year, more residents have moved out of New Jersey than any other state. Why do you think that is?
The affordability, the aspect of how can you raise children, possibly have mom home in the afternoon when your child comes home, and still make a living and stay here has become out of reach for most people. I go back to my children, talking about my daughter and son-in-law. They're probably got to move out of this state because they can't afford to be here and stay here. And I believe the statistic is actually 7 to 2. 7 are leaving, 2 are coming. I believe that is, you may want to check that, but people are coming here because corporations are demanding they come back here, and they're being relocated. Relocation in my area is very big for companies like BASF or Summit Medical Group or Atlantic Healthcare. All those people are bringing in people from all over the country to be in this area. So,
Well, and I think it makes sense too, because the majority of people polled said that the economy and affordability is their number one issue. But when you think about it logically, if you're concerned about the values your kids and your family are being brought up with, and you say to yourself, we can't even afford to live here, not to mention the fact that we're struggling to get by just so that our kids can be taught things that are not consistent with our values, of course people are going to leave. They're going to go try to find somewhere else where they can afford to live, and their kids will get the values that they want them to have.
I think it's a sigh of relief to go somewhere else. I just had a friend move to Tennessee, and he called me 6 months after he's been there. We were talking about it. I said, so how is it to live in Tennessee? You can't believe it, Mark. I'm able to actually take a breath. It's not every dollar coming in the checkbook is going out the other side.
Everyone has children, and what's the age-old thing? If my kids leave, I'm gone, right? As soon as they're 20 and they leave the nest, go to college, I'm out of here. I'm going to Florida, Texas, Tennessee. That's the story we all in our families have probably argued at Thanksgiving dinner every year.
But I do think it's different, though, because I've been a New Yorker for many, many, many years, and it's very much its own monster. It's its own beast. And I think people resign themselves. You move to New York, you're going to live in a tiny apartment, you're going to pay way too much money for it, you're going to pay way too much money for everything, but you're living in New York, you're getting the New York City experience. I do think that people think of New Jersey as a nice residential place where you can go and get a home and raise a family, or that's what it should be. So, you know, living in the shadow of New York City, I don't know that necessarily most people are going to say, well, this is just the way it has to be because we're in New Jersey. I think people do believe that they should be able to pursue that American dream, buy a home, raise a family, raise kids, get a good education.
Agree, but like as Dan said, as well as Mayor Mark said, the problem is the affordability. I've lost count of how many residents said I love the town or I love the people. I just can't afford to be here anymore. And before they start, I go, let me guess, Tennessee, Texas, or Florida, which one? It's always usually one of those three.
Thank God for U-Haul.
And it's always one, and you know, you see that in other states too. I mean, California, New York, there's certain states where people are fleeing. And it's because of it might not even be because of like the ideology. It's just because they cannot afford to live in their place. You know, even when we talk about these states, like, you know, there's Chicago and there's the rest of Illinois. There's New York City. New York's a big place, and a lot of that is very red. It's very different in a lot of these areas. But for New Jersey, it's just they cannot afford to be here anymore. So they're looking for a place where they can actually have some spending money, afford things that they want to do, take their kids out. And their kids don't want to leave their friends, so they kind of are handcuffed here, or so they say, until their kids are going to go to college or move out, and then they end up leaving. And in order to make them stay, we have to find a way to make it more affordable for them to stay.
I think, too, we're hitting a point with, and I know we're going to get to this later, but affordable housing, people just feel like there's too much traffic. And I think that's, you know, it's causing municipalities to suffer because we have to keep raising taxes to cover the cost of services. And I think people are just like, you know what, they don't see like an end to the tunnel of this is only going to get worse. And I think they're just saying, at least a couple friends my age in their mid to late 20s are like, I'm not going to invest here because the state just seems like it's only going to get worse. I'm going to go take a job, maybe even making a little less in another state, but I'll have double the quality of life.
We asked a lot of people the issues that concern them about New Jersey, and I was really surprised by this answer that we got from a lot of different people. I did not expect it. A lot of people said that they're very concerned about corruption in New Jersey.
I think that's more in line with the developers and the legislators' relationship. I think that's a little different than corruption.
Are we going to sit here and pretend like we've had federal legislators, state legislators, county, local legislators that haven't given the people enough to say, like, I think my government is corrupt? We have, so we can't sit here and pretend it doesn't happen. I think it goes back to the issue that we've been stating over and over again, is that there's too much power. They have too much money. They have too much control. The more power you have, the more likely corruption will occur. That's why it should be stripped down to its just bare minimum levels. I think I'm an effective mayor myself. I'm going to pat myself on the back. It's because I'm never going to do anything that affects your personal life. We're making sure that the water runs right, that the electric runs right, that we have police and fire. There is no ideology I have that I'm pushing on anybody. Nor do I ever get to touch any of the money. It's like the money is being sent out to where it's supposed to go and just goes right to the departments to handle it as they're supposed to. Yet there's too much. The more centralized you are, the more likely you'll have someone that's corrupt. And even people who think like, oh no, I would never end up going in that way. So yes, I completely understand when people say I think our government's corrupt. I would like for people to actually have proof of it before they say. Sure. Because sometimes they just don't like something like, oh, it's because of corruption. Don't just point the finger at people. But yeah, no, I tell people all the time, I get when people are like, I love what you're doing. I'm like, okay, just keep watching me. Okay? Don't ever turn your eyes from what we're doing. Watch us. See where your money's going. Ask questions. And the more transparent you are, legitimately transparent, the more likely you'll earn that trust. And that's why I want to keep pushing that forward. Talking about affordable housing, I still don't understand what that term means. Affordable to who? To Hollywood elites? To like low-income housing? To middle class? What is that magic word supposed to mean? And just telling a developer, listen, you have to build affordable housing. Okay, well, the wood still costs the same amount. The bricks, the cement, those are all inflated. So you're asking them buy the same amount of products and build these units, but just charge less for it. So what do you think's going to happen? They're going to go, this is not a moneymaker. Like this is my job. I'm here to make money. But you're telling them, no, just do it at a lower price. The person who made that decision is not suffering. It's the developer, the guy doing it. That's why you see in places where there's rent control or any type of rent stabilization, whatever, there's not a lot of new units being built. Why? Because it's not profitable for the developer. If you make it where someone can make a profit and there's competition where guys can come in, and then there's also, you need to like loosen your zoning laws a little bit.
Not
That doesn't-
loosen, extinguish your zoning laws. Come on, right? I mean,
You know what? You're right, and I want to say that. Yes, you are. Now listen, I wouldn't build a 50-floor skyscraper on Main Street when they don't have the parking or the fire that can handle if there's a problem. There's something that just don't make any sense. There is some way where government should have a say in what goes, but some of these zoning boards where it's like they have a guy there for 3 hours so he wants to put a pool in or a ramp for his nephew that's staying with him that's disabled. I've seen like them being grilled for hours and hours. Like, really?
Yeah.
That's not what this was supposed to be. That's not what the government was supposed to do. That's just giving power to people who shouldn't have none.
When you talk about, like, say, crime, right? Police talk about murder. They'll talk about words like opportunity and, stuff like the opportunity to have that central power is what creates the corruption, right? It's not the individual, us four sitting in office or Senator Menendez or any of these other people who get. The ability to have that corruption is what creates that dialogue. So if you had a piece of property in a rural suburban town, sure, we have local zoning laws. But if there's private capital in charge of that property, they can only build according to two things. One, the zoning laws, right, which the town has already established to create some semblance of character. And two, the market, right? Whatever they build there has to be sustainable by a free market. So if we're in a rural farming town with, idyllic country houses, building some kind of shopping center might not be a smart thing, right? So that'll dictate what choices that private entity will make and keep them rational. The opportunity for the corruption comes from exactly what both of them were saying. When the outside authority dictates what an outcome must be, you must build a 100-unit apartment complex in the middle of that idyllic country town. Now the governing authority has to go, hey, Mr. Developer, who has no business being here, we're going to bypass all of our rules and we're going to hand you a checkbook to go, build this property that we don't want. That's the corruption, right? And that's when people talk about developers shaking hands with politicians. That's bred by the laws, by those laws that create the opportunity for that corruption. If you just let private capital, the free market, make those decisions, it doesn't happen at that scale. So this seems to be the common theme in all the things we're talking about, right? The centralized authority is what breeds the problem. It's not like malevolent behavior from individuals. It's the system breeds and conditions people to go after that corrupt behavior.
Someone wants to redevelop their Main Street, and they give pilots a payment in lieu of taxes. But then you have homeowners going, wait a minute, he gets a pilot, why not me? I have to fix up my home. So that's where it feels like you're picking and choosing winners. It's like, okay, so if it's commercial, then I get a break. But if I have to fix the facade or the front of my house, I don't get the same thing. Why are they better? Why are they different? Because that's business. That's when they start thinking like, are you making money from this? Is there something in it for you? Even though your idea might be, no, I just want to make a nicer Main Street. Okay, but why not just give a pilot to all of us so we can all fix up our properties? Right. And there's not a good answer for that because they're right.
In 2024, we saw a pretty significant shift toward the right in the general election. And I'm curious why you feel like that was, and if you feel like it's indicative of a cultural shift in New Jersey towards the right, or was 2024 an outlier?
I think New Jersey's becoming more conservative. I think people are awakening to the fact. They're reading the newspaper, and maybe some of them they don't read anymore, to find the facts that are really what's going on in the state of New Jersey. We had a very, very good run, and I'm very thankful for coming within 5 points on the conservative side, as I am, to maybe doing something different in New Jersey. I just hope that pulls through in the next race for our governor's race as well.
It's a pendulum. I think it swings back and forth. You had a time where people were beat down for 4 years with statist COVID policies and unbelievable printing of money, not just during Biden, even at the end of Trump's administration. When you get destroyed on a personal level by government at every level, repeatedly, all of your assets diminished, your jobs taken away. I believe it was a third of New Jersey small businesses went bankrupt during that time period. That is not an insignificant fraction. You are destroying people's lives. So naturally, people will react, right? They're going to respond to the stimulus. So it makes sense to me. I maybe don't believe that this is a trend line that's going to necessarily keep going in a particular direction. I'm very cognizant of that. It shifts back and forth for the last 20 years. So on our side, at least in New Jersey, but on the federal level, that was a pretty impressive performance. And I think it's a response to what you had going on for the last 4 to 6 years in the country.
I don't disagree with you, and I don't disagree that politics is often cyclical. However, there are certain things we can look at, like the turnout in the Black community, the Hispanic community, and just about every minority community that voted more conservatively than they ever have before. And in some of those numbers, it was staggering. I mean, the Hispanic community shifted like 20 points to the right. It was really something. So when I look at some of those communities, like the minority communities that have typically been voting Democrat in large blocks, for them to shift, I don't think they're going to snap back quickly in the next election cycle. I do believe that in addition to there being a cyclical nature to politics, something is changing.
One of my favorite speakers is Victor Davis Hanson. I don't know if you know who that is.
I do.
Yep. But he had a quote about the elites of this country. I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically, they have this utopian worldview of how things are supposed to be, the ramifications of which never apply to them. They have their private jets, here's your paper straw. I can have all my security, here's a gun-free zone sign sticker for you.
Right.
Like, it's the hypocrisy. And again, I'm very good friends with the Newark Republicans. Yeah, Newark has a Republican club now, and it's pretty big. And there's a lot of Hispanics going that way, and I think they're just sick of the, not for you, but for me.
Sure.
That's the biggest deal. They're looking at a group of people who are dictating how you're supposed to live, and they've kind of had it. Even if we don't agree on certain things, I don't agree with this lifestyle, or what have you, we can still live together and live our own lives. But these people are saying you're not allowed to do this. And I think they've had it. I mean, this Department of Government Efficiency, I mean, like we hear every day about there's corruption here or there was waste here, and you hear certain people trying to rile up like this shouldn't be happening. And everyone's like, who's going to take the side of the people who are wasting our money?
Right.
That could have went to our communities. That could have went to our schools. That could have helped out people who had medical problems.
Yeah.
And it's $4 or $5 trillion, whatever it is. They're taking it. It's not going to where it's supposed to be. Where are you going to find a blue collar or low income person that's going to fight for them to keep that money and that waste? I think that's where it's really coming from. Yeah, I think eventually, there might be a new cultural thing where it shifts back for some reason, especially if there's a big push behind it, social media wise or what have you. But right now, I just think, especially in the last 4 years, there's we just kind of have these people telling us that you can't do this, I can.
With Doge, I think people are always like, oh, I don't mind paying taxes if it helps me cover this or if it does this for me. But I don't think people really realize, even in New Jersey, just where the $50 billion budget really goes. Okay, maybe by roads, people assume roads, schools, but I'm sure there's a bunch of these little pet projects for NGOs or nonprofits that when you figure that out, you're like, oh, well, I don't want to pay for that. I need money for food, and you're giving it to maybe some group to study this little snail in in the Pinelands or something, And it's I'm not saying the Pinelands aren't important to New Jersey, but if I'm paying money, I want it to help me or people I know, and not just for who knows what kind of projects are coming out.
It's $58.1 billion, this budget. It was $33 billion when Chris Christie was last in office. The state is bloated. The government is bloated. The largest employer in the state of New Jersey is the state of New Jersey, and it's wrong, and it needs to change. Just as they're doing in Washington, people need to see the real deal and note that it's got to change or it'll never change. And if there's not someone who has the intestinal fortitude to do the Doge as they're doing in Washington and get this state back on its feet and find out a way that we can operate systems that are in the 80s, the motor vehicle system, Social Security system,
Department of
Labor, every one of them are working on computers that have black screens in the corner. That's DOS, my friends. Yeah, it's crazy. Got to get with the next step in life. So.
In 2024 compared to 2020, Kamala Harris lost more ground with young male voters and young female voters than other age groups of people older than them from where Joe Biden was in 2020. So, in other words, people in their 20s, male and female, overwhelmingly came over to the red team when they went out voting. And I spoke to a group of people in their 20s earlier today, and I asked them why they thought that was. And the overwhelming answer that I got from people is that they felt like their generation is seeing more clearly the manipulation and the brainwashing from the media, that they're just not buying into the narratives. I think that other generations have in the past, which I find very reassuring. And I imagine a lot of that is the freeing up of social media that we're starting to see in the last couple of years. People are starting to be able to access more information and more honest and truthful information, or just more information, period, not being suppressed.
You're right. 15 years ago, you have politicians who can go from press conference to press conference, giving very measured statements that are all planned out, very clean. The questions from the press are all planned out. There's never really moments of candor where you can catch them and expose them. You're right. Any 18-year-old on the street can put a phone in your face and you're on Twitter viral in 10 seconds. So that is a great equalizer. And it also redefines what is a journalist. Because journalism to the elites in like New York and LA is like a noun instead of a verb, right? It's not a thing they do, it's an identity, it's a thing they are. And they are the arbiters of what you can know or think. When one of the documents came out from, was it either, there was some document dump that came out from our federal government, and someone on CNN was like, "No, you're not even allowed to look at these. I'm the one that CNN has to interpret this before the public can chew on this and whether they can even be allowed to think about it." Like that is literally how they believe themselves to be. They're this fourth wall of government in a way, and they're apologists for the state. So that landscape has flattened. So to your point, I agree. The generation that's coming up, they're smarter. I'm not like one of these colloquial boomers who think like, oh, these whippersnappers don't know anything. No, they do. They're very smart because they are seeing behind a veil that like, I think even in my generation, when I was 20, I could not see. The older generations, especially on a political level, it's to their detriment if they don't take them seriously. It's to their peril.
You see the news, though, network news and cable news, and you see the same phrase said time
Constitutional
after time.
crisis, constitutional.
I mean,
It's a threat to our democracy. Threat to our democracy.
Everything and criminal. Russia came back yesterday. Believe it or not, the problem is that the people on that side are somewhat gullible to information that they are given that's just passed on to them through a word, just a word. We'll just put this word out there and we'll get them. I have a friend who has a girlfriend who's they're in their 70s and they're dating, and she's afraid her Social Security is going to be stopped tomorrow. Not in 5 years or 12 years. It's stopping tomorrow. Didn't you hear it on the news? That's their narrative. They like to scare people up and turn the knob. Everybody is starting to smarten up, and you had that previous group with the young people. I think they are smartening up. They're understanding. I shouldn't say smartening up. That's terrible to say. I think they are understanding. They're reading and they're doing more research today.
Kind of came out with COVID was, you were looked down upon to doing your own research. And I think that's you're starting to see that with the younger generation. There's no longer this, well, the experts are always right. I think people are like, well, this is what I'm being told. Let me go see if this is accurate. The younger generation, I think, are already they're already kind of suspect of like, well, that person's in power. I shouldn't just assume they're a good person, that they're always going to be right. And I think you're starting to see that shift where it's like, okay, well, let me do my research. Let me look at both sides. I think younger people are more open to seeing what makes sense to them. And I think, the narrative from the news media is, it's laughable now. And like even yesterday, you've seen all these leaders in Europe tweeted the same tweet over and over because of what happened in the Oval Office between Zelensky and the president and the vice president. And I think people are they're not going there for news anymore. They know they're not getting the news from there. And I think the younger people are open to that.
I think the legacy media has lost control. Like they don't have that same power they once had. And it's not just like the media. It was Hollywood, all the forms of entertainment. There's so many different options that young kids have where they can seek out what they're looking for, find answers to things. I do appreciate that. I just think it's important for people to continue talking. People are scared of talking because they don't want to offend or hurt. But again, there's a way to explain these things without being confrontational, without being, sound like a crazy radical. Just keep talking. And there's a group of people that you're never going to reach. They have their beliefs, they have their opinions, you're never swaying them. And there's people who are like-minded, that it's kind of an echo chamber, but you're really looking at the people who are kind of in the middle, where you're saying, listen, this is why I feel this way. This is how I act as a mayor. This is why I think it should be this way. And eventually I think those people will come towards you. But you can't just say it once and then leave and go, I did a great job tonight.
Right.
It's really that's where I think that Democrats are probably better at their marketing, their messaging, because it's nonstop. It's all the leaders tweeting the same thing over and over again. It's a constant messaging. So if you're on their sites or you're in their sphere, you're going to keep seeing that. The other side has to do that too. The liberty-minded people need to keep saying it so that it sticks.
But you're right though, because it's not about intelligence, it's about skepticism. And I think that my generation, and probably many generations above me, we really weren't taught to be very skeptical of the media. In fact, I actually feel like I was taught to believe that you could trust the media. If you see it on the news, it's probably true. And somewhere along the way, that really shifted. And I love that you brought up COVID, because I think everybody was negatively impacted by the economic shutdown. I think it was bad for everyone. But I think if you look at teenagers and people who are now 21, 22 years old, they missed out on their proms. They missed out on high school sports. They missed out on activities. They missed out on going to school and everything that comes along with that. And no matter how you feel about COVID, I think all of us can look back in retrospect and say it was too much. The measures were much too much, and many of them very unnecessary. And so if you're someone who missed out on your teen years and some of the most fundamental moments of your life, and you look back at that and you say, I was deceived by all the authority figures and by me, you're probably going to spend the rest of your life questioning those authority figures, which I think is not a bad idea.
But why wasn't it substantially hurting for the Walmarts and the Home Depots and all those, rather the mom and pa hardware store in my town went out of business during that time frame, or the pharmacy became CVS. You no longer need a small pharmacy in your town anymore, because that's what big business did to them.
The authority figures in the media, we learned that where? Like in school, right?
That's right.
And who runs the schools? The state, right? So the state is telling you to trust this fourth wall that says the state is legitimate, and what they're telling you is legitimate. So we'll make that point first. To talk about, go back to legacy media. Legacy media is manufactured consent, right? It's Noam Chomsky's book, essentially. They give you a narrative so that you go and play that out, whether that's in the democracy world or in the business world, in the cultural world. What's the most popular podcast in the world right now?
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. How long is the average Joe Rogan episode? Hours. 3 hours, 4 hours, smoking cigars, drinking bourbon. If you are an expert, not who CNN or Fox News tells you an expert, if you are an expert in the field and you sit with a cigar with Joe Rogan for 3 hours, I'm going to know very quickly that you're stupid. I'm going to know very quickly that you're not an authority on that subject, or I will be impressed with your authority and I will be convinced that you are a legitimate figure in that realm, right? What is legacy media? And I'll tell you one thing, I despise political debates in their traditional form. You have 60 seconds to say something and then move on so this person can attack you. What does that incentivize the person who's speaking, who's there defending their viewpoint? Not to create this philosophical basis of a great argument, but some memorable sentence and an attack on the guy next to them. Cable news, who do they hire to put, as they call it, in the boxes? I know a lot of people that work for Fox and CNN and these outlets. Do you think they hire the most intelligent person? No. They hire a person who's going to be histrionic and fun to listen to, who's going to say bombastic things. The other person says bombastic things. Everyone on both sides is stimulated. Cut to commercial, buy your pharmaceutical pills, right? That's legacy media. Joe Rogan and this young generation, they get to sit there and listen for 3 hours to a guy and learn something and build a philosophical argument and go, that sounds right. Actually, that doesn't sound correct. But overall, this guy sounds like an authority on what he's saying. That's why those 20-year-olds are skeptical of the state, right? They're not being told by the traditional figures, CNN and this press statement from the New York Times are how you're going to modulate your philosophy about life. No, you get exposed to long-form dialogue. I think politicians should never engage in a debate with these 2-minute, 1-minute clocks. Put them in a room with 15 cameras like this and say, don't come out till one of you's asleep. And go at it and in a long form. That's when you really understand if someone's being truthful and knowledgeable about what they're saying.
But when you have the narrators against one or
Correct.
the other
Right.
at the podium, that's when it becomes a 3-on-1, as it was during a debate that I saw this past July.
And that's legacy. That's a legacy system that has to go.
Absolutely true.
Go on Joe Rogan. In fact, don't even go on Joe Rogan. Sit here at a table with 8 cameras and just talk for 8 hours about whatever you want. Why is it dictated by a third party?
I'll roll my sleeves. Let's do it.
Right. Let the candidates dictate the conversation, right? And you'll know very quickly. You think Kamala Harris would survive that? No. Right? A succession of politicians wouldn't be able to survive that. They survive because that authority, the press, curates these environments where they don't have to be smart. They have to remember a 30-second soundbite and repeat it 15 times at each stop they go to. That's easy. That's
Kamala
acting.
Harris was not the candidate. She was the backfall. That's all she was.
So as we wrap up here today, four gentlemen who are mayors in New Jersey, what is your hope for the state of New Jersey going forward? What would you like to see?
I think, 25 years now the Democrats have been in charge of the legislature. I just think it's time for maybe residents to just for change, just to see what the Republicans could do if they were in control of the state. And then, I would hope if that were the case, one, the biggest thing is the affordability issue, but I think I think maybe it was Dan who said it, instead of trying to build affordable housing, I think you just need to make the state more affordable. So that would be the first thing. And then I just think we have to give more power back to the local level, whether it's school boards or local government. Just let's just try different things. I'm hopeful people are starting to wake up, but I still think there's going to be a challenge. Even if this year the governor becomes Republican, I mean the state Senate's not up, so there's still going to have to be some kind of wheeling and dealing there. But I think realistically, I would just like to see New Jersey more affordable, keep people here. Maybe that brings industry here, better paying jobs and stuff like that.
And to get more involved in local government, they need to come out and be voting every year.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say our town is noted to be the town of volunteers. And you're scarcely finding one person to volunteer to be on the planning board, the zoning board, recreation commission, because people can't. They have no time because they're working 1 or 2 jobs. They're working in the city. They're commuting back and forth. So going with that same premise, I think that New Jersey needs to become more affordable. And I say this tongue-in-cheek about the parties in the state of New Jersey. My town has been Republican since 1899. It's never changed. It's never wavered, but I don't think we're political. The state of New Jersey and the legislator that we are under the doctrine of is political, and they operate in a different fashion than we do. We are, all of these 4 gentlemen here, myself included, are public servants. We're there for our residents, whether it's nighttime, daytime, in the middle of a storm, when power's out, we're there to help. We're not there to increase the population for some unknown reason. There's 8,000 people waiting on the affordable, non-affordable housing list in the state of New Jersey. That needs to be cleaned up. There needs to be a way to build projects in an area where there are jobs and there's transportation, not where you're having to have 2 cars to be able to transverse the town for the day to go to school. So I think that if New Jersey were a better place, I think it'd be more affordable and more accessible to other people, including our younger people.
So I'm an activist at heart that became a politician by accident. I've been a plaintiff. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. I'm a plaintiff in multiple federal lawsuits for gun rights, for natural rights. And I think a lot of people look at policy and how to get to the results you want as purely democracy, government and democracy. I'm a subscriber to philosophers like Michael Malice, Cody Wilson. They operate in the political realm, they operate in the gun world. And they make certain statements like, the answer to gun control is gun proliferation, right? The typical activist would probably conjure up things like the NRA or these gun groups, and let's give money to fight lawsuits or lobby politicians to change laws. Then there's people like Cody Wilson that go outside of that spectrum and go through culture and reality. They create a platform where anyone can digitally download a firearm code or data and then print their own firearms. And then Michael Malice says, you can point at history with the Soviet Union, with the Third Reich. Gun proliferation is more effective at stopping gun control than politicians. Because if everyone's armed to the teeth with guns, it's very difficult to come and confront you to take that away. So that's a real, Cody Wilson had a great interview with Glenn Beck years ago, like 15 years ago, where he said, that code, that's my politics, that's radical equality. It was under Obama. I didn't get there through democracy, I didn't get there through politicians. I created that data, I distributed throughout the world, there's millions of copies of downloaded, there's nothing the government can do to stop that. That's real activism, right? That's real change. So for me, as much as politics is important in our municipalities, culture is very important. And Andrew Breitbart was a guy that always said, Politics is downstream of culture. So when you talked about that pendulum swinging, you can keep it on our side if you keep the culture talking towards the spectrum, towards liberty on that political spectrum. And that's what I think is most important.
If I had my way, I would say instead of looking for people that are making great memes about the other side or, saying I'm going to force the other side to follow our rules, our beliefs, I would say look for more people that say things like, don't hurt anybody, don't take their stuff, mind your business. I'm not interested in diversity at all. I'm interested in unity. Let's become more unified. Let's look for people who actually believe that, listen, these people in this room right here, we could probably get more done ourselves than by going to some government agency to do it that doesn't know us, they don't know anything about us. They can't decide what's best for us. The individual is the best, and if we work as a group, we can do more together. Let's have more unity at a local, county, state, federal level. But otherwise, let people be who they are, who they want to be. As long as it's not hurting anyone else, let them be. And I feel like that's a more winning message than I'm going to force you to believe in this. I'm going to force you to learn this. No, that's against human nature. It doesn't work. Preach more liberty. That's what I would like to see in the future going forward. I think that more people will go to the liberty side if you could continue to go that route.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.